Okay, it's time to begin. Let me go through our prayer list and then a couple other announcements, and then I'll introduce those who are serving for our devotional tonight. And our prayer list has been updated a little bit. Rich Beatty Sr. will have back surgery on the 31st. Gary Schelt is still recovering from his stay in the hospital. Daniela Barnes is here tonight, recovering from her surgery, as is Chipper Barnes here tonight, recovering from his. Pat Boren's dealing with her health issues, having many strokes. Emily Benvenia's brother, Josh Whitley, the consult for his heart. Sammy Brandon's son, Salem, in the hospital in Miami. Sarah Alcius' brother, Paul Roberts, having significant health issues. Aiden Jordan has some further tests and consultations. Sue Evans' stepson has surgery on the 19th. Mike and Susie Williams' son, David, is dealing with shingles. And Bubba Clark's friends, JT and Catherine Benton, are both going through cancer treatments. JT is one of the elders at the congregation where they were before they came down here, and so they've requested us add them to the prayer list. That's all that I have for the prayer list. Does anybody have anything else? Okay, I've got three other things real quickly. One is we printed out Sunday the list of those who were not here in November so that we could follow up and find out what the needs are and all of that. We printed that out and we failed to mention it. So we'll mention it tonight, and those copies are up here on this podium if you want to pick one of those up so you can contact those who have been missing and encourage them and see where they could use assistance. That would be a good outreach opportunity. Also, Saturday night is the a holiday party at the LeConte's house at 6 o'clock, and there is a sign-up sheet in the foyer. If you would, please sign up for that so that we know how much food everyone needs. And make sure you put your name so we can compare that with how much we know that you eat. And then we'll have enough food for everybody. Terry, we didn't sign up. You got to sign us up if you will, please. You did? Okay, I'm signed up. Okay. One other thing, Bubba Clark told me that they are replacing some furniture in their home, and they have a very good bed that they're going to be getting rid of, and they just hate to just get rid of it. So it is a king size. So if you're in need of one of those, talk to Bubba, and he can tell you what they have, and then if you want it, they can make arrangements to help you achieve picking that up. Okay, if there's nothing else, in our devotional night, Tony Solomon is going to lead the songs, Tristan Morris will lead us in prayer, and Yoff Lawrence will extend the invitation.
Good evening, good evening. We're blessed to be here again this evening. As always, to our visitors, you are our honored guests. Those who've been in the hospital, you are blessed, and we are blessed to have you back with us. And we pray that things continue to go well. I'm going to ask, if you would, please turn your hymnals to number 584. That will be the invitational at the proper time. And I'm going to surprise you in a few seconds with something else. 584, invitational. The opening song, if you would, 583. That way you don't have to work too hard to find it. Sing to me of heaven. Sing to me of heaven, sing that song of peace. From the source that by me it will be released. Burdens will be lifted at a pressing soul. Showers of great blessing for my heart will flow. Sing to me. Souls and glory of its earthly gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me the sun's trouble. Sing to me of heaven as I walk alone, dreaming of the comrades that so long have gone. In a fairer region, among the angels throng, they are happy as they sing that old sweet song. Sing to me of heaven, let me finally dream of God's love's moon, glory of His earthly gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven, see the stars above. Sing to me of heaven tenderly and low, till the shadows o'er me rise and swiftly go. When my heart is weary, when the day is long, sing to me of heaven, sing that old sweet song. Sing to me of heaven, let me finally dream of His glories from glory of His earthly gleam. Sing to me of shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven, sing the songs of all.
Will you bow with me? Dear Lord, thank you for waking us up on another beautiful day on your earth, and thank you for letting us gather here tonight to study your word and to learn more about you. Lord, thank you for our Christian family here at Stuart, and let us be forever grateful for each other, and let us lean on each other during our trying times. And once again, thank you for the opportunity just to come here to learn more about you, and let us keep our minds and our hearts focused on your word, and let us apply the lessons to our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
If I were to ask you tonight, what is it in life that you struggle with? What are your challenges? What would you like to have resolved and never have to deal with ever again? We all struggle with many things in life. The list is very long. Whether it's relationships, loss of a loved one, stress at work, illness, many different things that we have to deal with. But there is one thing that we all have to deal with that is similar, and that is tomorrow. Doesn't matter what we deal with today. Doesn't matter if it's resolved or not. Tomorrow is a new day, and tomorrow will bring its own challenges once again. Some of us might argue that since I'm a child of God, tomorrow is going to be easy. If tomorrow is going to be easy, is it because I say things I shouldn't? I look at things instead of looking away? I agree with things I shouldn't agree with? Or maybe I accept things that is unacceptable to God. You see, we always look for the easy things and the easy way out. And so often that is what we do with Christianity when we want to present it to the rest of the world. We want to sell it as the easy way. Just give your life to Christ and everything is going to be okay. All of your problems will disappear. Yes, there are many things that will be different in the life of Christ. There are many, many things that will be better. But nowhere in the Bible can I find anything that tells us that it's going to be easy. Things will not be easy because of the choices we have to make. And I don't think there's anything we do more, except maybe for breathing, than making choices. From the moment we get up to the moment we go to bed, we make choices. You might be sitting right now, you might decide to listen to me. Maybe your mind is not here at all. You have chosen to think of something else, the problems you have in life, the things you have to face. We make choices all the time, every moment of our lives. And those choices will take us into one of two directions, either to the world or to Christ. You see, we no longer serve the world. We don't no longer accept what the world offers us. Instead, for most part, we go the opposite way. Going the opposite way, going against the stream, against the majority, will never be easy. In Matthew chapter 5 and Matthew chapter 6, the Bible talks about a reward on earth and a reward in heaven. And if I have to summarize these two chapters, come to the conclusion that all of mankind will be given a reward. God gives us the opportunity to choose when we want it. We can either choose to have it here on earth and enjoy life the way it is, but that is the only reward we will receive. At the end of our lives, it will be eternal hell. Or, like most of us, we have chosen God's way, where things will not be easy, but the reward will be at the end. James 1:12 tells us, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him." So often when we face challenges, we ask ourselves, why? Why me? Why now? Why this? There might be many different answers, but the one I could find is, if we want it easy, that is the reward we'll get today, and there will be nothing left later. Life is not going to be easy. As long as we serve God, it's not going to be easy. I don't think God ever meant it to be easy. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be tough. It's going to be challenging. But the reward that awaits us is all the worth it. If you're not a child of God, then you have made a choice. You have chosen to have your reward right now in this life, and there's nothing left later. But God has also given you the ability to make a choice and change that. And I hope you do. If you are a Christian and the challenges of life are sometimes just too heavy, that's why we have a family, so we can share those burdens and carry them together. Whatever your needs are, please come forward as we stand and sing.
Jesus is calling, calling for you and for me. See on the portals, he's waiting and watching, watching for you and for me. Come home, come home, ye who are weary, come home. Earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling, oh sinner, come home. Why should we tarry when Jesus is pleading? for you and for me. Come home, come home, ye who are weary, come home. Earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling, oh sinner, come home.
Okay, you're dismissed to your classes. My class, when we ended last Wednesday night, we were in Revelation 13. Revelation 13. As I have been doing, I want to review, and there are pieces that I don't review every week from the introduction, but I always try to start, especially from chapter 4 on, with the review from the chapters, and that's because I think there's a timeline that is very helpful to keep in mind as you go through this book, especially as we go further after tonight. There are going to be some things that are so blown out and pulled out of their context and misapplied today. And yet, Rich and I were just talking about this just a moment ago. It's impossible even to make the arguments that are made today consistently with the timeline issue. The timeline just kind of clears things up, or at least helps you understand what cannot be. But it's the book of Revelation, recorded by John on the island of Patmos, about AD 94 to 96. He's there exiled for his faith. It is symbolic. It is a revealing in symbols, which means it doesn't represent itself, right? A symbol does not represent itself. And so there are several things you could do to figure out what it does represent. And the two things that are most important to me are sometimes right in the text itself, we're told what it means. And most of the time, you go back to the prophets and different books in the Old Testament to help us understand this, because that would have been the mindset of the first century Jews who were the recipients of this book. So it's about Rome, judgment on Rome, and the theme is God wins. Okay. I'm not ever going to say that again. I'm going to ask you every time just like that, and then I'll repeat it after you say it, because I want us to remember that. Okay, now remember, again, I'm going to start in chapter 4 with the kind of the chapter review, because chapter 4 is really where the apocalyptic visions are seen. We see some things earlier in chapter 1, and there's some things in the letters to the churches of Asia Minor, but really the theme following through the timeline starts in chapter 4, because right after talking about all the things that's been happening with Rome, chapter 4 tells them and us that God's still on his throne, right? No matter what it looks like with Rome, no matter how powerful the emperor looks, God is not going to be defeated. He is still on his throne. He is still ruling, and he's worthy of worship. 4 living creatures, 24 elders, and all the host of heaven worship him. He has in his hand a scroll. It's sealed up with 7 seals. The number of 7 is the number of deity or perfection. So it's sealed by God, isn't it? And the scroll contains the future. Scenes from the future, and John wants to see it, but nobody can open it. Nobody can open this scroll, and so he's crying, and a strong angel says, you don't have to cry. Here's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He has prevailed to open the scrolls, and John looks, and it's not a lion, it's a lamb, and it looks like it has been slain, killed, but yet it's standing, so it's alive, and that's what made the lion or the lamb worthy to open the scrolls. Well, who was that? Jesus. And so then the hosts of heaven worship him as well. So God the Father is on the throne. He's worthy of worship. Jesus is alive. He has conquered death. He also is worthy of worship. Chapter 6, he starts opening those seals, and they tell us about the future. They're not judgments. They're just the future. And the first 4 seals are what's going to happen to the church in the future. First seal, they're going to continue to spread the gospel. Second seal, that's going to cause persecution to get worse. Third seal, it's going to not just be the government, it's going to start being people. Fourth seal, people are going to start dying. Fifth seal, the angels or the souls under the altar who have been slain for their faith cry out, how long? How much longer has this got to go on? And the answer of God is not yet. It's not time yet. It's not time yet. There's several things that have to happen, and then judgment will come. And then 6 seals says, but when it does come, this is what it's going to look like. And they look at it and they say, how is that possible? Who can endure this? So you get to chapter 7, and it's a pause. And the pause is the answer to the question, who can endure this and who can endure it? The faithful. God marks those belonging to him, symbolically. He marks those belonging to him, and they will be the ones to endure. Chapter 8, he opens, the 7th seal is opened, and there's silence in heaven, and in response to the prayers of saints, God answers. And what he answers with is trumpets. And these 7 trumpets are partial judgments. Why not just go ahead and judge them? Huh? God doesn't want anybody to be lost. He wants people to repent. And so partial judgments were to bring about repentance. And so you go through chapter 8, 9. Chapter 8 is really the first 4 trumpets, but they're these partial judgments, and they kind of connect back to some of the plagues in Egypt in the way that they're portrayed. Again, they are symbolic. It's not a literal blood, and it's not a literal fire, and it's not a literal stars and all of that kind of thing. Chapter 9, you get the 5th trumpet, and all of a sudden you have this pit. And the pit is the corruption, the decay that's within Rome itself. And from that comes this group of locusts, and they kind of devour a third of everything. But again, we're not reading, it's not locusts because he calls them locusts. They're described as people. They even have faces of man, but they're very ferocious and powerful and swift, and they hurt people. And that's just the corruption of Rome as the elite continue to live these great lives, everybody out here around them suffering because of the consequences of their decision. That's part of God's judgment. And then we got the 6th trumpet, which then allowed the Parthians to start their time of the wars, the Parthian wars, the Roman and Parthian wars, and the problems that they created for Rome. Chapter 10, there's another pause between the 6th and 7th trumpet. This pause, the first pause between the seals was to tell who's going to make it. This pause is to tell the ones that are going to make it, what are you supposed to be doing? And so during this partial judgment on Rome, what are these people supposed to be doing? And John was first, and his job was to take this book and eat it, right? And when he ate the book, it was going to be like honey in his mouth and bitter in his stomach, meaning it came from God. That's a wonderful thing to get this message from God. So he's supposed to prophesy. The problem is this message is not a great message. And that is people are going to suffer, right? So it was bitter to him. So he's supposed to write, and we've got it. We're still studying it. John was supposed to do all of this. What about the church? What were they supposed to do? Stay faithful, keep teaching the gospel, right? And it'll look like the lamps, they were called lampstands and olive trees and, what was it? I'm going to have to look again. I don't even have my glasses. The 2 witnesses, olive trees, lampstands, and witnesses is what they're called here. And they represent the church, right? And it's going to look like Rome wins. They're going to lie in the street dead for 3.5 days. It looks like Rome wins, and that's not a literal 3.5 days, just like nothing else in. But then they rise up. God strengthens them. The church endures, Matthew 16:18. It's not going to be defeated. Okay? Then the 7th trumpet sounds, and then we start into where we were last week. So when the 7th trumpet sounds, John starts seeing this battle. Chapter 12 there's a recounting, if you will, of the history of this battle between good and evil, and how that Satan had tried to oppose God and God's plan with Israel, who was like a woman with child waiting to give birth to the Messiah, right? Satan tried to destroy Israel. Did that work? No, it didn't. They existed, didn't they? And then when she gave birth to the Messiah, Satan tried to destroy the child, didn't he? Did that work? No, it didn't. And then we go all the way in one verse from the birth of the child to the ascension. His whole earthly ministry in one verse, Satan tried to defeat him. In fact, he followed him to heaven at the ascension, and God defeated him with the battle with the angels fought with him, and he was cast down to the earth. And then we have what I told you is, I think, the most encouraging statement in all of the book of Revelation, and that is the accuser of our brethren is cast down. That happened at the ascension. How is it that he could accuse us before and not accuse us after? The faithful, the brethren. Because what? Because now we have a mediator. Jesus died, was resurrected, and ascended to be our mediator. And so Satan can't go to God and say, guess what Terry did? You know who he used to be? He's not a whole lot better than now. He can't do that like he did with Job, because God has cast him down through the blood of Jesus. And so that's in chapter 12. But now the problem is when he was cast down, he went after the church. And yet God protected the church and he couldn't destroy the church. So what does he do? He goes after Christians, individual Christians. And that's what he's still doing today when Peter talks about he's like a roaring lion walking about seeking whom he may devour. He's after you and me individually now. All right, that takes us to chapter 13. And this is how. How is it that Satan is continuing in this battle? And specifically in their day, it came about in two prime characters or prime positions. It shouldn't be characters. Two prime positions, because there were more than one individual that served in these two roles. And by the way, chapter 13 is the most popular or famous chapter in the book of Revelation. Most people don't know where to find the verse that they know is that they quote or talk about, but it's in chapter 13. And we'll get to it tonight. But the first part of chapter 13 is this first beast, and he connects right back to that beast that was over the bottomless pit in chapter 9. And who was that? That's the emperor, right? So the first beast is the emperor, and he has his power. Oh, wait, one other thing that came out in chapter 12. The character showed up for the very first time who was called the dragon. Who was that? That's Satan himself, okay? So when you read about a beast in Revelation, you may not know who you're reading about, but you know who you're not reading about. You're not reading about Satan, because Satan's the dragon. So this first beast in chapter 13 that I've already told you connects back to chapter 9 is the emperor gets his power from the dragon. So his authority and the one that he's following and the one that is providentially taking care of him and giving his position and promoting him is the devil, right? All right, and we ended, if you remember last week, you probably don't. I went back and checked it just to make sure. At the end, I looked at my page here and saw we were ending in verse 7 and said, that's a good place to end. And then I turned my page and looked and said, oh, that's a terrible place to end. So what I want to do is I'm going to start reading there in verse 6. And I'm going to go down through verse 10 because that's where we should have ended last week. And I want to summarize that and then we'll keep going. All right, chapter 14, Revelation, beginning in verse 6. He, this is this first beast, this is the emperor, symbolically. He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. And it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. And we stopped there by talking about the fact that it was granted to him. Who has the ability to grant powers? God does. So why would God grant Rome the ability to be in power when he already knew what they were going to do? Huh? Using them for what? Well, he did use them for some punishment, but there was much more than that. This goes all the way back to Daniel chapter 2 in the vision when Nebuchadnezzar had the dream and the image, and it had the 4 different types of materials that made up this image, and Daniel interpreted it by God's power as being 4 kingdoms. And each one of those kingdoms were a part of, they were pieces of what Galatians chapter 4 would call the fullness of time, when God would send forth his son into this world. And each one of those nations, the Babylonians, Medes and Persians, Greeks, and Romans, each nation brought about different things that made it perfect for the gospel to be presented for the first time on the day of Pentecost and then go throughout the whole world. Yet all of those were necessary pieces in God's providence. On top of that, God used them as judgments. So the Babylonians judged Judah for her wickedness, but then the Medes and Persians judged the Babylonians for their wickedness. And then the Greeks judged the Medes and Persians for their wickedness. And then the Romans judged the Greeks for their wickedness. And then God judges the Romans, Revelation. And so they were granted to exist to accomplish what God wanted to happen, but that did not mean that they were going to endure forever. I turned too many pages. Verse 8. And all who dwell on the earth will worship him. Who's the him? The emperor. This is this beast here. You worship him whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Now, why is it that everybody except those people whose names are in the Lamb's book of life will worship the emperor? I don't think anything that you said is wrong, but I don't think they're technically the right answer, because here's what I would say. Do you think that there are good people whose names are not in the Lamb's Book of Life? Yeah, if you want an example, the account of Cornelius starts that way. He's a good man. He gives alms to the poor. He prays all the time. He is a good man. And yet we're told that he's lost. Well, if he's lost, what that means is his name's not in the Lamb's Book of Life, right? Now, by the time the account ends, his name is in the Lamb's Book of Life. But what this text says is anybody whose name is not in the Lamb's Book of Life would then be following the emperor, as it were. And so my question is, why would a good person do that? Here's the answer. If there are only two options, God or good or evil, God or Satan, if there's no in between, all right, if you're not following God, why not accept the fact that the emperor's a god? That's why you would, because you need to work, you need to eat, you need to live. If Rome is in charge, you're going to say, if you're not a Christian, you're going to say, okay, I'm okay with that. You're in there. Yeah, you're a God. Great. That's how I work my way and continue to exist in society. On the other hand, if my name is in the Lamb's Book of Life, why can't I do that? Because I can't have anyone before God. And because I know that there is only one God and the emperor is not a God. But the answer to the question that he's asking, or he's giving to these people who are the Christians at the end of the first century, who are facing all of this, is that this emperor who has all this power from Satan and is fooling the whole world is going to end up being extinguished the same way that he's extinguishing everybody else. You fight with the sword, you lose with the sword. You fight with the lamb, you win with the lamb. All right? But now another beast shows up. Verse 11. And I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. So this is interesting, the symbology here. It's a second beast, so it's not the first one, so it's not the emperor, right? And it's not the dragon either, right? So we know it's not Satan, and we know it's not the emperor, right? That's just where we start from. And what do we see about him right off the bat is that he has horns like a lamb. Looks like he's connected to God, religious, looks like the Lamb of God. He looks like he's connected to God, yet what is he doing there? Speaks like the dragon. So he looks like he's connected to God, but what he's saying is a message that didn't come from God. It's a message that came from Satan. I'm going to make application of that. I don't want to get us off track, but that's the application of that is that's true of every single religious movement or teaching that comes from anybody but God. If I get up here and you say, oh, he's a spiritual person and he's the preacher, he knows what he's doing, and I teach you anything but the truth, it doesn't matter how sincere you think I am, how good you may think I am, how much you think I may be right with God. If I'm presenting something other than God, I'm speaking from the devil. That's what Paul said in Galatians 1, beginning in verse 6. Didn't he say, the we, let's start with that. Who's the we? We would include Paul, wouldn't it? We or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel to you than that which you have received, let him be accursed or anathema. Okay, well, this is this religious leader of some sort that looks like he's somehow connected to spirituality or to God, and what he's talking is, or what he presents is something that's a message from Satan. Verse 12. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Now that tells you who this is. This is the priesthood. Wasn't that the job of the priesthood of God under the old covenant? Weren't they supposed to proclaim the power of God and make access to God for the people? Wasn't that their job? And so whoever these people are here, or this person in this case, of this second beast, they are people who exercise the authority of the first beast, which was the emperor, and cause the people to worship the emperor. This is the priesthood of emperor worship. Rome was set up. Their emperors claimed to be deity, and they had priests that went out and made people accept that. In fact, what they actually did is made people commit to acknowledging that the emperor was a god in order to continue to exist in society. And so they are forceful upon this. Well, there's one other statement. What about that wounded part? The wounded part, he was wounded by the sword and lived. Remember, we talked about that. I didn't bring that up tonight. Last week, toward the end of class, when we were talking about that first beast, we read about he wasn't there. He was gone, but yet he lived, or he was wounded, and yet he lived. And I told you that near the end of the first century, because of what was happening with Domitian, there was this myth, this legend, if you will, a legend that existed, and it was called the Nero Redivivus legend. I don't know whether that's what they called it. That's what we call it today. Nero Redivivus. And what it meant was Nero started the persecution of Christianity. Jews started it, but as far as actual Gentiles persecuting Christianity, it begins with Nero in AD 64 because there was a huge fire in Rome and he was in trouble, so he blamed it on Christians. And he made it illegal to be a Christian in Rome. But the problem was Nero died 4 years later. He died in 68. And he didn't have the power, obviously, to do anything after death, right? So persecution just kind of, it was still illegal to be a Christian in Rome, but it never escalated. It just kind of floated along until Domitian showed up. And when Domitian showed up, Domitian was the first emperor to claim to be a god while he was still alive. And when he claimed to be a god while he was alive, he said, now it's illegal to be a Christian anywhere because Christians don't acknowledge me as God. And the Nero Redivivus myth was Nero died, but look, he came back in Domitian. Okay, so this emperor is saying, look at that. They actually perpetuated that legend. They said, look at that. This is Nero back in the form of Domitian, and he is a god. All right, let's keep reading. Verse 12. Verse 13 to 15. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and live. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So let's start with his power. He's got power to say, if you're not going to acknowledge the power of the deity of the emperor, you die. That's the power behind this priesthood. But what he does to accomplish that is trickery. He's able to, it's not true miracles that they're doing, that it says he has the power to do, call down fire from heaven and all that. So it's trickery. You know that because it says they deceive them. So they don't have the ability to do literal miracles. This very much goes back to the imagery that's found in the 10 plagues. When Moses shows up and he stands before Pharaoh and says, God says, let my people go. And Pharaoh says, that's not going to happen. And so Moses says, well, you're going to see. You're going to see God's power. And so he goes out and he turns the water to blood, doesn't he? And what did Pharaoh's magicians do? No, they did it too. They did it too. They did the first few. And then finally they turned to Pharaoh, and one of them got beyond them, and they said, this is the finger of God. We can't do that. Their trickery works up to a point, but it's not going to keep up with God, right? And yet these priests, the priesthood of imperial worship, had the ability to fool people. And everybody just kind of went along because they had the power behind it. Of course I don't know whether people were actually fooled or just submitted to it, at least the majority, but I do know this. People will go around the world to believe anything that is foolish. It frustrates me so much how many times I have friends or brethren that send me some message on Facebook or something about something so far off the wall of the world. I remember when COVID started, and I know that there were all kinds of rumors about how it started and where it came from, but I got messages from people saying it was 5G telephone service did it, and they had the what's that? They had the TikTok video to back it up. Some guy on TikTok had made the video and exposed that the governments of the world were poisoning us with COVID with a 5G cell phone tower. The problem is the person that sent it to me lived on an island in the middle of the ocean where there were no 5G cell phone towers. And yet they had COVID on the island. We'll believe anything. And that's what happened in the first century. These guys could fool people, and they would say, wow, I can't do that. And so the emperor must be a god, right? All right, 16, 17. And this is the imperial worship priest, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of the name. And so we read this, and everybody says, oh, no, and don't read the next verse. Don't look down. No, some of you look down. Don't look down yet. I want you to see the next verse you said. I'll read it in a minute. This is where everybody looks at it and said, oh boy, see, that's the mark of the beast. This is terrible. Somebody's going to have the mark of the beast. I get videos all the time. Probably once every 3 months, somebody in the world will send me a video about some government's going to put dog microchips in you. And some of them are already doing it secretly, I've been told. And it's the mark of the beast. Oh boy. What in the world would that have meant to the first century Christians?
Mark?
No, that some doctor's going to put a microchip in you that's going to track you with satellites around the world. What would that mean to some Jew living at the end of the first century? Or any Christian? Nothing. Yet, if you stay in our context and in our time frame, all we have to do is go back a few chapters to chapter 7, and we have in between the 6th and 7th seal this messenger from God going out and marking people on their heads who belong to the Lamb. And that was a connection back to Zechariah when they went through the city of Jerusalem, or Ezekiel rather, when they went to, a messenger went through the city of Jerusalem, put an X on their head before God judged Jerusalem. It wasn't some guy walking around with a Sharpie marking on people's heads. It was a symbolic mark that God sees. And in this case, the emperor also knows who belongs to him, or Satan also knows who belongs to him, right? If God knows who belongs to him, does Satan know who belongs to him?
But I don't want to argue, but the emperor, in order to be able to work for Rome, he marked his people, didn't he?
No.
He gave them a mark?
No, there was no literal mark in Rome. No, but the emperor ruled over Rome. But what they did do is they had documents. The priesthood had documents that people had to have a document that they had proclaimed the emperor as a god that they would sign on. And then they were allowed to go ahead and trade and all that stuff. Yeah. But no, nobody was running around with a literal mark on their head. No, yeah, we're talking about the document, not somebody with a tattoo on their head. Yeah. Okay, now here's the last verse. Ready? This is the most famous verse in the book of Revelation. I've seen it in movies. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. For it is the number of man, his number is 666. Now he just went from mark to number. He went from mark to number. Okay, those are not the same thing. The mark was, who do they belong to? That's Revelation 7. That mark, who do they belong to? They belong to God. This mark in Revelation 13, who do they belong to? They belong to the emperor, or ultimately Satan. That's the people whose name is not in the Lamb's Book of Life. But understand this, God says, wisdom says, let's think about a number, not the mark. He's not saying somebody's got 666 on the back of their head. You know that you can't get on a cruise ship and get the room 666? Yeah. It's like, yeah, elevators don't have the 13th floor either, but that's got nothing to do with the mark of the beast, though. This one's the mark of the beast. Yeah. Yeah. I have known people that would buy something extra. They go in a store and it came out 666. They go, I got to buy a candy bar now because I can't pay 666. Oh, somebody tell me what the number 6 means. Don't leave me yet, Don. I got to go through this. Number 6 is the number of man. The number 7 is the number of deity. The number 6 is the number of, 7 is perfection, 6 is imperfection. 7 is perfection, that's deity. 6 is imperfection, that's man. What does the number 3 represent? Completion, something that is complete. You got your charts. I can't go back through all of those numbers again, and I'll give it to you another time if you wanted, but you got a chart. We went through those way back at the beginning of this class as to why these numbers represent that. And so when you have in Revelation chapter 4, when God is still on his throne and the 24 elders and the 4 living creatures and everybody else cry out, God is holy, holy, holy. What are they saying? Completely holy. God is 3 times. God is completely holy. There is nothing about God that is not holy. So now when you get to Revelation 13 and verse 18, you have God saying, okay, in 17 he said, listen, the devil knows who belongs to him. They have a symbolic mark, not a literal mark, just like everything else is symbolic. The devil knows who belongs to him, and it's anybody who doesn't belong to God. But I want you to know something. This guy that is the emperor and this guy that is the priesthood of the emperor is 666. That's wisdom. That's who he is. Who is that? He is completely and absolutely man. He is man, he is man, he is man. That's what he just said. He is absolutely man. So you look at the emperor and you say, well, he's going to kill me if I don't bow down to him. He's a god. I've got to claim to be a god. Oh, no, no. He's a man. Oh, and by the way, he's not even a little bit of God. He's not even a minor God. None of him is God. Is there anybody here tonight? Please don't answer yes. Is there anybody here tonight who is deity? Is there anybody here tonight who's a little bit deity? You know, there are actually religions in the world that believe that the further you go through life and the better you get, that you become deity. That's a part of this New Age religion and things like that, that you can ultimately be good enough to become deity. If that's the way it works, I'm going backwards. You're not even a little bit deity. And that's what he says about this emperor. So should they fear the emperor? No. Now, ultimately, obviously, you fear the power of what he's accomplishing, but the truth of the matter is, God wins. So the emperor, he's just a man.
Two things I want to throw out at you is that when I was preaching here years ago, we literally had a guy come in here claim to be an angel of God. I kid you not. That's number one. Number two.
Glad he didn't strike you blind.
To reinforce what you were saying about the word mark, Paul talks about marking those who walk disorderly.
Yep.
That same word, the mark, is not used in the sense that I'm going to draw on the wall.
Right.
It is a word that literally means to identify or to point out.
By evidence.
By the evidence of the way one works, acts, or behaves. But it's not necessarily a carving or a drawing. It means symbolically, as you said, to mark, to identify.
And he uses it in the same way about his own life when he says, I bear in my body these marks. Exactly the same way, and that's exactly the way it's used here. It's not about some guy got a tattoo on his head of 666. It's about, or even be born that way. That'd be scarier, wouldn't it? Birthmark. That's the movie I saw. Anyway, it's about the fact that these people, by the lives that they were living, are human. But you can tell the difference between who belongs to God and who doesn't. Okay, did I confuse everybody with that? I want you to get that part. When you go to work or when you go to school or when you go watch a TV show and somebody says, oh, 666, they're putting the 666 in our arms, we're in trouble. You should know better. Now, you should know what that meant was the emperor was not a god. He may claim to be a god, but he wasn't. Isn't that a lot more simple than somebody trying to figure out in AD 96 that 3,000 years from now, somebody's going to come up with a microchip that'll fit inside your arm, and then the satellites, which were flying 1,000 miles above the earth, are going to send signals to it so that the government that doesn't even exist in AD 96 can track your whereabouts, and you can scan your arm over the barcode that doesn't exist and buy food that doesn't exist. Which one makes more sense? If somebody says it's the second one. Okay, we got 10 minutes. I'll go on into chapter 14. I spent longer in chapter 13 since I planned to, or than I planned to, so I'm not going to trip myself up in chapter 14, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you about it. As we get to chapter 14, now we're going to start to see the fact, actually, let me go ahead and turn my notes so I can see where I am. What we're going to see is a shift in the narrative. This is really going to talk about this battle, okay? As this battle continues, there are consequences to Christians. It's not the fact, listen, just to say that God wins doesn't mean that, like Yop was talking about a minute ago, that all of a sudden life just suddenly became great for Christians, right? There's still a battle that has to occur, that we have to go through, or that the Christians with Rome even had to go through. So though he was bringing judgment on Rome, there was still a whole lot to go to. And that comes out in chapter 14. But I want to tell you a couple things. It starts out in a good place, and then it gets to some more challenges. But I want to tell you a couple things before I start reading this, because I don't want to go too far in this chapter. You know that I've been writing the book. I'm done with that. But my editors are going through it, and I'm going back and correcting things. But one of the reasons, I've already written the preface. And in the preface, one of the things that I say is that I've wanted to write that book for many, many years. And one of the reasons I chose not to is because every time I study anywhere, but especially the book of Revelation, or every time I teach the book of Revelation, I learn more. And as I learn more, sometimes I say, well, the way I used to present that wasn't the best way to do that, or I see something I didn't see before. And the book's not even in print yet. I'm not even sent it to the publisher yet, and there's already something in chapter 14 that I have changed. I haven't changed. I've changed it in here. I haven't changed it on paper yet, or digital yet. So I don't want you to, I'm saying that now to say this. I don't want you to get the idea that I'm some kind of a world expert that's got this whole thing figured out. All we're trying to do is look at the big picture and see the big picture of what God is trying to paint here. There are individual signs that we're not ever going to understand, and probably many of them don't even have a purpose. They don't even have a meaning, except for to continue to confuse those who wouldn't listen to God and help people that would listen to him understand. Right? Okay, so we start with a group of people here in chapter 14. This is not where I've changed my mind, by the way. That won't happen until next week. 14, verse 1. I looked and behold a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 having his father's name written on their foreheads. Okay, a couple things. First place is, where's Mount Zion? It was in Jerusalem. It was a temple area of Jerusalem. Okay, what is it here in verse 1 of chapter 14? What is it not? Let me ask it that way. What is it not? It's not Mount Zion. It's not the Temple Hill in Jerusalem. How do you know that? Because that's the symbol, right? And the symbol doesn't represent itself. However, what Mount Zion was, in a literal sense, was where God met with his people. It was access to God. That's what Jerusalem was. When they went to the temple, the temple was kind of the permanent tabernacle, right? And you remember when we talked about it at Mount Sinai, when they were putting together the tabernacle, and there was a holy place, and there was a most holy place, and there were the courtyards and all of that, and they had access to God, but they could only go in the most holy place that one day per year, right? Okay, and only the high priest could do that, right? Because it's about access to God. So as we read in chapter 14 now in verse 1 of Mount Zion, we know literally it's not that place. So we figure out what it represents, and what it represents is access or status. It represents a relationship with God. And who's in this access in verse 1? Well, who's the people? 144,000. Literally says 144,000. I wanted to bring that up because we saw them before. We saw them before. And where were they? They were on the earth. Chapter 7. They're the very people on the earth who are not literally, who are figuratively marked by God as showing that he knows who belongs to him. Remember when we went through chapter 7, there were 144,000 on the earth who were marked, and in heaven there was this innumerable crowd. But on earth was 144,000. Nobody remembers that? I'm going to have to finish the book. All right, and the reason I pointed out the emphasis that they were on the earth is because there's a belief system today that believes there's only going to be 144,000 in heaven, and they weren't there. They were on the earth. And they're still, the status, though, is victory. They have access to God. So in the beginning, when they say, who can endure? God said, all the faithful can endure. And when God's partial judgments are over and he's going to judge Rome, guess where guess the status of the 144,000? They're still enduring. That's what this means. Huh?
I'm one of those.
You wouldn't have been a first century Christian, but yes, as a Christian, you have access to God in that same status, yes. Yeah, but these are literally Christians of the first century. They're still existing as this battle is going on. They're not being defeated. And the Lamb's there, right? The Lamb, isn't he the one that provides us access to God? The Lamb? Okay, verse 2 and 3. I got 3 minutes. I heard a voice from heaven like the voice of many waters and like the voice of loud thunder. Heard the sound of harpists playing their harps, and they sang as it were a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn that song except 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. So the status is, here's why this is significant. It doesn't really matter who these people are. What matters is their status with God. Here's a question. If I'm a Christian living under the oppression of the Roman Empire and I live, do I win? Yes. Okay. If I'm a Christian living under the oppression of the Roman Empire and I die, do I win? Yes. That's the point. The 140, the faithful, those who are in the Lamb's Book of Life, the figurative 144,000, their status with God does not change based on what the emperor does. And so Christians sing this song of redemption, or this new song, as it were. Remember the song of Moses and the Lamb that we talked about earlier? And you remember how it all connected back to what happened with Egypt? When they left out of Egyptian captivity and they're standing at the Red Sea and they're trapped, and here come the Egyptians and God stops them, and then he parts the water and they walk across on dry ground, and then he moves and then they come across after him and God brings in the water, and over there on the shore after God frees Israel from Egyptian power, they sing a song of victory. They sing a song of victory that God had taken the rider and the horse and cast it into the sea. And that's what they sing in Revelation. And that's what we sing in eternity. Not the release of the power of Egypt, but the release of the power of Satan. These people are singing the release of the power of Rome. But it's always about that. It's all about delivery from the power of the world and from evil and from Satan. And it's all done by the power of who? The Lamb. The Lamb that's standing there that the 144 are worshiping. And by the way, I don't want to get off topic, but everybody that wants to argue about instrumental music or all that stuff, they say it. Look here, they're going to have harps in heaven. I don't know whether you know what that is, but I know what it's not. It's not a harp, because that's what it says it is. What it is it's praise. It's praising God. God created the strings of our hearts to worship him, and that's going to be all for eternity. Okay, I can't keep going. I'm going to run further out of time. So there's probably never a good place to stop for me anymore, so I'll just stop here, and we'll pick it up again there next week and continue on. I hope I haven't confused you more tonight. I know tonight was a little bit more complicated. I've tried to keep it as explanatory as I can. If I have confused you, I'll try to clear it up next Wednesday night. Okay, let's close with a prayer. Father, we're so thankful that we can be here tonight and study your word together. We're so thankful, Father, that you've preserved these messages, that we can have confidence in you, that we can trust that no matter what happens in this life and no matter what power exists, that you are all powerful, that you ultimately provide victory for those who follow you. Help us, Father, to shine your light into this world by the lives that we live, to point others to you. Forgive us where we fail you. In Christ's name, amen.